Hello and welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top local, national, and world stories from a moral, ethical, and religious point of view. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a local panel of distinguished religious leaders. Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville, Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ, Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition, and Rabbi Emerita Gaylia R. Rooks, the Temple. We begin this week with the devastating fires in Los Angeles.
This morning, for the second straight day, millions facing an extreme fire risk in Southern California. The next 12 hours, critical. Fire crews scrambling to mop up any remaining hotspots, fearing that powerful Santa Ana winds and dry conditions could rekindle the monstrous Eaton and Palisades fires. Palisades fire now 18% contained as new clues emerge about how it may have started. ABC News has learned that the ATF, the federal agency charged with investigating arson and explosions, is zeroing in on the Palisades Highland area.
The foot of the fire started real close to where the last fire was on New Year's Eve.
Some residents pointing to this fire first reported on the hillside just after midnight on New Year's Day. By 3:38 a.m., the fire is stopped, and an hour later, by 4:46, fully contained. Fire officials say that ash pits or tree roots can smolder for days unseen.
Wait, we were right behind it.
Then at 10:30 a.m. Tuesday, January 7th, the Palisades fire was reported. These side-by-side satellite images seem to show that fire starting at nearly the same spot as the fire the week before. We witnessed the furious firefighting efforts at that spot as the Palisades fire began to spread. FEMA on the ground in L.A. already receiving 40,000 aid applications. 84-year-old Susan Solser says she watched the Palisades fire approach her home from her kitchen window before fighting the fire with her 86-year-old husband, Winston, saving their home.
I wasn't sure where Winston was. Couldn't contact him, but it turned out he was at the south end of the house doing the same thing.
The Palisades and Eaton fires have claimed the lives of 25 people, and the survivors are still reeling.
It was literally shooting like fireballs. It looked like a volcano.
Zaire Calvin remembers the Eaton fire surging towards the place he's called home for 47 years.
I got the
You're getting your mother.
Getting my mother. We're going. I go to the left, and my sister's car is still there.
He says he thought his sister, Evelyn McClendon, had managed to leave already. The next day, they located her.
When you're mourning your sister's death, there's no real understanding. There's no understanding. There's no way to even take it in.
The family hit hard, but not giving up on their community.
Everyone is fighting. Everyone is literally just asking, leaning on each other to say, what's next? What's the best thing to do?
So panel, I'll turn it over to you. Your thoughts on the tragic fires in LA. There's a lot of discussion on accountability as well and the response efforts and how could this happen?
Well, I mean, accountability, those questions would be secondary and tertiary. The first question is how to respond to the crisis, I think. First things first, I mean, this human life is threatened, has been lost. So that's the first concern in my view. Thank God for FEMA. I was just thinking a lot of times, we had the funeral of Jimmy Carter recently, and I just discovered that FEMA was created as an executive order under the hand of Jimmy Carter. So thank God for that organization that was set in motion from the benevolent heart and hand of Jimmy Carter. When you see these crises that have occurred on a national scale, this occurred many times in New Orleans and other places around the country, FEMA has been there in a lot of ways to provide aid that was desperately needed. So thank God for FEMA. And for those that are on the ground trying to help, the firefighters that are on the ground, the local officials that are trying to do what they can to mitigate the loss of life and the protection of property as best they can. And then for them to be sadly demonized politically in many respects, by the obvious right, who always has a quick and swift and uninformed, uncallous, uncaring criticism to level whenever things like this occur. So so that is a whole nother issue. But I just this devastation is just on a whole nother, apocalyptic scale. They ask how can it happen? I guess they can theorize how. But I had a fire. I survived from a fire. Just moved back into my house last year from a fire I had a little 3 years ago. And fires can reignite. When my fire occurred at midnight, and they appeared to wrestle with the fire most of the night, trying to get it under control. And then on that Saturday morning, they thought they had got it most under control, and then they saw another smoldering somewhere in another pile of books. So they had to go back in and basically go through the whole process all over again. So these things can happen. A fire can smolder for hours, and sometimes in these cases probably days, and reignite. So I pray for the firefighters. I understand that they have been severely understaffed, probably in many cases underfunded. There have been some funding issues at play here. Even inmates have been employed to help with the firefighting effort. So it's been just a example of how tragedy can bring people together, and always going to be somebody who's going to try to exploit that tragedy for their own personal agenda. So that's a real tragedy in the midst of this whole catastrophic event. But the fact that people have come together is the greatest jewel, in my view, that has been revealed through this tragedy.
And as of our taping on Thursday, I think there are 25 people confirmed dead, but a lot more missing.
Oh,
so we
yes.
really have no idea what the death toll will be. And I mean, it's just so, it's such a tragedy. I like the way you look on the bright side and say if we can find any spark of thankfulness in this, it's, how people come together. They don't care who you voted for when they're trying to, and of course, moral side of the news, Crusade for Children, we love our firefighters.
Amen.
We know what a difference they can make. They do make all the time, not just in emergencies like this. But having said that, it's more than just the human lives, which of course nothing compares to losing a loved one. But synagogues, mosques, churches have been burnt to the ground and destroyed. My sister-in-law lives out that way, and I was talking to her. What do you pack in your emergency, in your to-go bag? I assume everyone's read the same kind of reports of people who said, well, I took the this and the this and the this, but it wasn't until we were gone that I thought, oh no, my grandfather's, family heirlooms and things that are so meaningful to the family.
That are irreplaceable.
That are literally irreplaceable. Not like, life is, the ultimate irreplaceable, but it's just, and when I mentioned that to my sister, she was like, oh, I'm only concentrating on, and they actually, once they were in the clear, they started taking in pets of people who had been evacuated and stuff like that. And it's just such a, everyone trying to come together and help other people. That part of it is very heartwarming, but the overall devastation, just to see what's going on there, it breaks your heart.
And I think, California's had many more to the north rather than the south, forest fires and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it's caused by climate change. I didn't realize till the articles that you sent out that this is the rainy season, usually in LA, and they haven't had any rain since October. That's a mystery, but it seems like there's climate change. And then, when everything's so dry, it's like kindling, it just goes right up. And I think we'll all see mistakes. It's just like at Katrina years ago, where people are building houses right on the ocean and not realizing there could be a 30-foot wave come in and not build your house up. When you're building your house out of wood in the middle of the woods, that doesn't seem to make sense, but it's a lot more expensive. And unfortunately, I mean, trying to come to their aid, and what is it, 12,000 homes at least have been destroyed. You know, when you think about that, that's a small city in many different ways, and we're not done yet in many ways. And some of them are very wealthy communities, obviously the stars, but then there's some very poor communities as well. How do we come to their aid, and what's the implications? As happened to be talking to somebody who's an insurance agent, she said, you know, we're all going to be paying a lot more. Prices are going up. We know it in Kentucky. After our floods and our tornadoes, home insurance has just gone up, and it's going to affect the whole country like that.
There's talk of insurance agencies not being willing to insure people in fire zones or major flood zones. And
you know, I've always said you pay to live in paradise, and I think that's what they were doing. But you don't expect that kind of a full storm effect. You know, you try to think ahead, but I don't think you're ever prepared for something that's ignited like this. And then watching it on television, it looks like all of California is burning. I mean, and you're just like, oh my gosh. I've got a friend who has a daughter out there, and talking about how difficult it is, and then the smoke inhalation that everybody is going through. That's also going to take a health toll. So there are all sorts of things that, you know, I just don't think that you're ever prepared. But dealing with the aftermath, once you've got the crisis, then you've got to deal with the aftermath of the crisis. Right. And I think that's what they're working on right now.
Well, despite the affluence, the apparent influence in many areas, probably most areas may be considered affluent, I guess, in some respects. But just to call into question, nobody's exempt from tragedy.
Yeah, man.
that's right.
You may have a tax exemption, you may have a lot of other exemptions, but there's no such thing as a tragedy exemption. And tragedy has a master key, and those of us who study the Old Testament, we talk about the study of the Old Testament story of Job, of course. He was a very affluent man, very rich man, but tragedy, knocked on his door. Not only knocked on his door, but used the key and walked on in and did what it needed to do.
Made itself at home.
Made itself at home, and didn't ask his permission, and didn't give him an advance warning. So no one's exempt. That's one takeaway. No matter how much you may accumulate, no matter how much you think you've saved up, no matter how good you think your insurance is, it never covers everything. I realized that with my fire. It covers a lot, but didn't cover everything I lost. My heirlooms and books and just things that were irreplaceable just will never be. And I've had many sleepless nights. The trauma from it is still, probably should have gone through therapy and didn't do it, but the trauma is immeasurable. So, but no one exempt, no human being on earth, and that's one reminder that we all, as humans, that's the one common thing, that it comes with this dirt that we live in. We are human beings.
There's also unity in the suffering.
It is.
I think those who have suffered through this understand and can have empathy, you know, and building empathy. I think one of the hardest things to teach a child is how to build empathy. And so, you know, sure, you can watch it on TV, but it's not the same thing.
It looks like the movies.
It does.
Doesn't it look like, okay, cut, take two, let's do that again with less fire on this side. I mean, it's just surreal, the whole experience. My brother lives in Northern California, and he's, you know, been very near, within, I think, 2 miles of his house. You could see, maybe it was just 1 mile, you could see, I was at his house after that, and he said, I stood where you're standing now and see where that's where the fires, that's how close they came. Wow. I mean, it's just...
Our house burned when I was in middle school, and right before Christmas, and I remember my mother bringing everything we had in a paper sack. That was all that was left. But it's the smell, it's the little things that smell will never, ever go away. So it's the little things that you don't recognize at the time that are going to mean something later on.
I think, as we've said, and Clay, you said it well, I was reading a couple of stories about some of the religious groups in LA coming together, praise God, interfaith, ecumenical, all that, and the enormous amount of assistance that they're trying to do, are providing shelters, trying to provide food, water, all those kind of things. And I mean, that shows the generosity of so many people. But I think in a world oftentimes, lately it seems like lots of folks have lost a sense of compassion. You know, we sometimes don't care about the rest of the world, only our own country, when we're, you know, the wealthiest country in the world and have so much. Well, we got to take care of our own. People say that all the time, and then we say, okay, how are you going to help some of our own here? Well, they don't deserve it, you know, and that's that kind of sense that from a religious dimension, it seems like some folks have lost a lot of sense of compassion and mercy and coming to the aid of someone else. And yeah, I can take less so that some people can have something.
I was reading a story about a synagogue. So one synagogue burned down and another one, almost all around it burned, but it was left totally intact. And so they were taking in, you know, homeless, newly homeless and everything. And there was an interview with this guy who said, I've never been in a synagogue before. I don't even really, I mean, I know some Jews, but I don't really know Jews. And he said to the rabbi, are they always this caring and compassionate? And the rabbi said, well, they're supposed to be. Which I thought was the perfect answer.
Hit the little jab for the ones in the back.
We're all supposed to be.
You know, I was thinking of, just from give a quick thought, I thought about 911. One thing about 911 I recall a photograph that made probably the cover of Time magazine or New York Times. But it was after the disaster, that everyone that was leaving the towers was all covered in ashes.
Right.
And you didn't know who was who. You didn't know who was white, black, or what nationality they were, Asian. You didn't know if they were rich or poor, but everybody was covered with the same the results of the ash of the crash covered everybody. They were all covered the same. They always had the effects. They were covered with the common residue of the tragedy. And tragedy is a way of doing that to all of us. When we all go and have a funeral, we say, what, earth to earth, ashes to ashes.
Right. We're all equal in death.
Right, so that's a common, regardless of the faith, we do that. But then this tragedy in California has created that same kind of commonality, of cover of ash, so to speak, poetically and literally, that could affect us all. So it's it calls us to be compassionate and to care, because we all in it together.
Amen.
Very good discussion. Let's turn to the second topic today. It's been the major news story as well as the LA fires this week. And as of our taping on Thursday, I want to show you this story from World News Tonight that was done Wednesday on the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas.
A sense of relief in the streets of Tel Aviv and Gaza tonight, after Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire with the release of dozens of hostages still held inside Gaza in exchange for hundreds of Palestinians freed from Israeli prisons. Starting this Sunday and over the next 42 days, Israeli troops will withdraw their forces to a buffer zone around the Gaza Strip, halting military operations for the release of 33 hostages, starting with all women, children, elderly and the sick and injured. The pause in fighting would allow desperately needed humanitarian aid to flood into Gaza and allow negotiations to begin for a long-term ceasefire. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who approved the deal, will now seek the green light from his security cabinet before going to his wider government. Barring any legal objections, the IDF would start receiving hostages in what they're calling Operation Wings of Freedom. Gil Dickman, cousin of hostage Carmel Gat, killed in captivity in Gaza, praising President-elect Trump.
I think Trump was the X factor in bringing this deal to life.
The framework of the deal, spearheaded by the Biden administration, Qatar and Egypt, has been on the table since May. But after Trump's election victory in November, there was renewed momentum to close the agreement.
I knew this deal would have to be implemented by the next team, so I told my team to coordinate closely with the incoming team to make sure we're all speaking with the same voice, because that's what American presidents do.
With just days before he takes office, Trump calling it an epic agreement. This deal, a major promise for the president-elect.
If the deal isn't done before I take office, which is now going to be 2 weeks, all hell will break out in the Middle East.
The deal, the first truce since December 2023, now puts Israel and Hamas one step closer to ending a 15-month war that began early on October 7th when Hamas fighters brutally kidnapped and killed more than 1,200 Israelis. Following the horrific attack, an unrelenting assault launched by Israel. Entire areas reduced to rubble. To this day, more than 46,000 Palestinians have been killed.
So again, that was as of Wednesday. We tape on Thursday. There's a lot that can happen. I know, Gaylia, you've mentioned before the show that there's still a lot that needs to happen before this agreement goes into place. But your initial reactions to this agreement as we know it now?
Please God, it should only happen. It's just, I mean, the whole thing is so horrifying, starting with Hamas's just inhuman, brutal, unthinkable attack. Teenagers and young adults at a music festival, and you know, Israel responding powerfully, rapidly, as you said, with the fire, the time to discuss how this could have happened in the first place and be caught so unawares. But as the weeks and months and, you know, more than a year, like 15 months has gone by, it's first of all spread throughout other countries in the Middle East, and you know, now is not the time for politics, but the parallels between Netanyahu and Trump have always been very eerie, how similar they are in certain ways, including, in my opinion, and in many liberal people's opinion, putting self before country. It remains to be seen whether the Knesset, what do you call that in English? The Parliament. Whether the Parliament will even accept this deal, because it's become a very, very right-wing governing body. And there are radical right-wing people who are actually saying, you know, that they want to settle the West Bank. They want to settle Silwan in East Jerusalem. They want to, I mean, it's like,
when you say settle, they want to move
they want
in
to
and
put
develop.
settlers in there and yeah, make
from
settlements.
Israel, right?
Yes.
I got you. To expand them,
right?
Yeah.
And that's a very small minority, but it's very vocal and in very strategic places now. And you know, I really worry about that. This is the opportunity to come together, to move forward. My last trip to Israel was in March, before October 7th, and peace was so close. I mean, so many people from Gaza came into Israel every single day for work, for hospitals, for, it was, peace was so close you could taste it, but it's so far now. I mean, even some people I know who've always believed in a two-state solution, Israel and Palestine living side by side together, even they have given up on that hope, which I will never give up on. So all we can do is pray that this ceasefire goes through. The hostages that the 33 hostages out of almost 100, we don't know how many are alive or dead, but still counts on bringing them home.
Well, you know, I mean, math is, war has a different way of creating new math, as they say. Counts, who counts and who doesn't count, how you count. The casualties, of course, the number that keeps coming up is 46,000, and about half of them are children.
That's not to disagree, but that's Hamas's number.
Okay.
That's where we're getting that information.
Okay, but it's a high number.
Oh yeah.
And it's exponentially high number. So and I think there's no dispute on that. You may parcel out some, but and the fact that it was more children, it was a high number of children, you won't debate that. So it's been a horrible, to call it a war, I think is another thing. It's to respond to the October 7th situation is one thing, but it escalates as long as it's gone. The way it's gone with all the deaths, particularly the children, is in a whole nother orbit, okay? Again, to give give Trump credit for anything positive is suspect.
Right. Well, I think one of the things, just like in our last story about the fires, one of the real consequences, let's hope for peace, praise God, whatever, but then how do you rebuild? I mean, the area of Gaza has just been totally destroyed. Hospitals, everything you can name, and 2 million people in that area,
Displaced.
where are they going to go and all that? I mean, the logistics of all the, if there is a ceasefire, is going to cause, you know, a lot of help from the whole world, not just Israel and not just the Arab community and all that kind of stuff. And I fear that, again, with the isolationists and within our own government, that, well, we don't need to help any of those people because we got our own to help, you know, that we got into the fires. And that's the sad thing, that we're all children of God.
Amen.
And we're all in the same world.
Made in the image of God.
And when our brother or sister are hurting, we're all hurting. And I mean, that's the basics of both Judaism and Christianity, for
And
sure.
Islam.
And Islam as well. So,
It's the angst of not knowing.
amen.
I think if they had some idea of what was happening, but they don't, and on this not knowing goes, so you're imagining the worst, how could you not? And so hopefully there will be a release, the people will be reunited, but there's also going to be the trauma that everybody has faced, and going through that particular kind of it's not even a nightmare. I don't know what you would call it, but that, you know, trying to deprogram yourself from this kind of traumatic event, let alone reorganize. But then there's also the human spirit. And the human spirit has a lot of resilience that we often don't give ourselves credit for. So I think that it will be there.
I just pray that the moral voices will emerge. I don't just hear the moral voices loud enough coming from Israel. I mean, just about hope the moral voices will become loud as the bombs.
The highest, most righteous command is redeeming the hostage. And I don't think that Netanyahu is acting in a Jewish way. It's just not. It's not. He's not acting in a Jewish way. He's not acting in an Israeli way. He's not acting in a humane way. Never mind religious of any religion.
Right, I got you. I agree.
Well, we have a lot of issues right now, and we need to be, as religious leaders, I think we've got to get our congregations to think outside of, it's not just egg prices and gas prices. It's also about a lot of other people, and we all need to help out and lift a brother or sister up.
I don't think we can even imagine. I don't even, living in the United States, I don't think we can imagine something like this. It's not in our realm of thinking that somebody will walk in and just take people away from us.
I'm going to jump in right there because it's been a great discussion. I hate to cut you off, but that's all the time we have for this week on Moral Side of the News. So thanks to our panel, Father Joe Graffis, Reverend Sally McClain, Reverend Clay Calloway, and Rabbi Emerita Gaylia Rooks. Thanks again. We'll see you all next week on Moral Side of the News.